The leather suitcase hit the dirt with a thud that seemed to echo through Caroline's entire body, and she stood there, in the scorching Texas sun, watching the only family she had known for 5 years turn their backs on her without a single word of goodbye. Caroline Sullivan had been married to Richard Sullivan for 3 years before the fever took him last winter, leaving her a widow at 24. She had loved him with every fiber of her being, had tried desperately to give him the children his parents so desperately wanted, but month after month brought nothing but disappointment and increasingly cold stares from her mother-in-law. When Richard died, Caroline had hoped his parents would allow her to remain in their home, to grieve together, to find comfort in shared memories. Instead, Margaret Sullivan had waited exactly 6 months before delivering her verdict over breakfast one morning. "You failed to give us grandchildren while our son was alive," Margaret had said, her voice as sharp as broken glass. "We have no use for a barren daughter-in-law. You will leave by week's end." Caroline had pleaded, had reminded them that she had nowhere to go, that her own parents had died when she was 17, that Richard had been her entire world. But George Sullivan had simply shaken his head and returned to his newspaper, and Margaret had walked out of the room as though Caroline had already ceased to exist. Now here she stood on the outskirts of Desdemona, Texas, in the brutal heat of June 1882, with everything she owned in a single suitcase and exactly $14 to her name. The Sullivan ranch house loomed behind her, and she could see Margaret watching from an upstairs window, making certain she actually left. Caroline picked up her suitcase and began walking toward town, her dark blue dress already clinging to her back with perspiration. Desdemona was a small town, barely more than a main street with a scattering of businesses and homes, but it was all she had. She would find work somehow, perhaps at the general store or the boarding house. She had to survive. The walk took nearly an hour, and by the time she reached the edge of town, her arms ached and her throat felt like sandpaper. She set down her suitcase near the water trough outside the livery stable and cupped her hands to drink, not caring that several men were watching her with curiosity. She probably looked like exactly what she was, a desperate woman with nowhere to go. "Madam, you all right there?" Caroline looked up to find a tall man standing a few feet away, his hat in his hands. He had dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds, and there was something gentle in his expression despite the rough stubble on his jaw. "I am fine, thank you," Caroline said, straightening her shoulders and trying to look more composed than she felt. "Forgive me for saying so, but you do not look fine." He glanced at her suitcase. "You just arriving in town?" "I suppose I am." Caroline hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to a stranger. "I am looking for work, actually. Do you know of anyone hiring?" The man studied her for a moment, and Caroline felt her cheeks flush under his scrutiny. She must look a mess, wind-blown and dusty from the road. "What kind of work are you looking for?" he asked. "Anything respectable. I can cook, clean, sew, keep accounts. I am a hard worker, I promise you that." "Isaac Thompson," the man said, extending his hand. "I have a small ranch about 3 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, just cattle and horses, but I could use some help around the place. My housekeeper left last month to care for her sick sister, and I have been making do on my own, but the house is falling into disarray." Caroline shook his hand, startled by the calluses on his palm and the warmth of his grip. "Caroline Sullivan, I was recently widowed." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, sympathy perhaps. "I am sorry for your loss. Look, I know you do not know me from Adam, but I give you my word I am a decent man. I can offer you room and board plus $30 a month. You would have your own quarters in the house, completely separate from mine. I need someone to cook, keep the house clean, maybe help with some of the lighter ranch chores like gathering eggs and tending the kitchen garden. If you want, you can come out and take a look at the place before you decide." It was too easy, too convenient, and every instinct told Caroline to be cautious. But she was tired and hot and had nowhere else to turn, and there was something honest about Isaac Thompson's face that made her want to trust him. "I would like to see the ranch," she said. Isaac smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and almost boyish. My wagon is just over at the general store. Let me grab those supplies I came for and we can head out. 20 minutes later, Caroline found herself seated beside Isaac on a weathered wagon, her suitcase in the back alongside sacks of flour, sugar, and coffee. The road north was dusty and rutted, and the landscape stretched out in all directions, brown grass and scrub brush broken up by occasional stands of mesquite trees. "How long have you had the ranch?" Caroline asked, needing to fill the silence. 5 years now. I bought it with money I saved from working cattle drives. It is not much, but it is mine. Isaac kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the reins. I have about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses. I do most of the work myself, though I hire a couple of hands during a roundup and branding season. That sounds like a lot of work for one man. It is. Isaac glanced at her. I will be honest with you, Miss Sullivan, I am not looking for a wife. I tried marriage once about 6 years ago, and it did not work out. She left after 8 months, said she could not stand the loneliness of ranch life. Since then, I have kept to myself. But I do need help, and if you're willing to work hard, I think we could have a good arrangement. Caroline appreciated his directness. I'm not looking for a husband either. My marriage was a good one, and I am still grieving. I just need a place to stay and honest work. Then I think we understand each other. The ranch came into view about 10 minutes later. A simple wooden house with a covered porch, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a corral where a handful of horses stood in the shade. It was modest but well maintained, and Caroline felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of it. It looked like a home. Isaac helped her down from the wagon and carried her suitcase onto the porch. Let me show you around. The inside of the house was indeed in need of a woman's touch. Dust covered every surface, and dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen. But the furniture was solid. The rooms were spacious, and when Isaac showed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house, Caroline could see it had its own door that locked from the inside. "This would be your room," Isaac said. "I sleep in the room at the front of the house, and there is a guest room in between that I use for storage mostly. The kitchen is well stocked, and you are welcome to cook whatever you like. I am not particular about food, as long as there is plenty of it." Caroline walked to the window and looked out at the barn and the land beyond. It was quiet here, peaceful, in a way the Sullivan house had never been. She could breathe here. "I will take the job," she said, turning to face Isaac, "and I promise you will not regret hiring me." Isaac smiled again. "I believe you. Welcome to the Thompson Ranch, Miss Sullivan." The first week passed in a blur of hard work. Caroline scrubbed every surface in the house until it gleamed, washed and mended the curtains, organized the pantry, and cooked 3 solid meals a day. Isaac was gone most of the day working with the cattle, and Caroline found she enjoyed the solitude, the chance to put the house in order and create something like a routine. Isaac was a quiet man, polite and respectful, and he seemed genuinely grateful for her help. He ate whatever she cooked without complaint, though she noticed he particularly enjoyed her biscuits and beef stew. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch for a little while, and Isaac would tell her about the ranch, pointing out landmarks in the distance and explaining the rhythms of cattle work. "You ever work with cattle before coming here?" Caroline asked one evening, as they watched the sun set in a blaze of orange and red. "Started when I was 14, Isaac said. My father had a small ranch in Oklahoma, but he lost it in a bad winter. I went to work for other ranchers, learned everything I could, saved every penny. Took me 10 years to buy this place, but it was worth it. You must love it very much." "It is the only thing that has ever been truly mine." Isaac paused. "What about you? Where did you grow up?" "San Antonio. My father was a clerk in a law office, and my mother took in sewing. They were good people, hard-working. When they died in the cholera outbreak in '75, I went to live with my aunt, but she passed 2 years later. That is when I met Richard at a church social. We married 6 months later." "And his family treated you poorly?" Caroline had not mentioned the details of her departure from the Sullivan house, but apparently Isaac had heard the gossip in town. In a place as small as Desdemona, news traveled fast. They blamed me for not giving them grandchildren, Caroline said quietly. After Richard died, they had no more use for me. Isaac was silent for a long moment. That is a cruel thing to do to someone. Yes. Caroline felt tears sting her eyes but blinked them away. But I suppose I should be grateful in a way. If they had let me stay, I would have remained in that house forever. A ghost in the place where Richard and I were happy. At least now I have a chance to start fresh. You are a strong woman, Miss Sullivan. I am trying to be. As summer deepened, Caroline fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, fed the chickens and gathered eggs, tended the kitchen garden where tomatoes and beans grew in neat rows. She baked bread twice a week, preserved vegetables, and kept the house spotless. In return, Isaac was unfailingly kind, always thanking her for meals and making sure she had everything she needed. But despite her busy days, Caroline found herself noticing things about Isaac that had nothing to do with their working arrangement. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he lifted heavy objects. The rare smile that lit up his face when something pleased him. The gentle way he handled the horses, speaking to them in a low voice that made them calm. She told herself it was simply because Isaac was the only person she saw most days that any woman would notice such things about the man she lived with. But late at night, lying in her bed and listening to the sounds of the ranch, Caroline found herself thinking about what it would be like to have Isaac's arms around her, to feel safe and wanted again. It had been over a year since Richard died, and even longer since they had been intimate. Toward the end, he had been too weak from the fever, and before that, the disappointment of her inability to conceive had cast a shadow over their marriage bed. Caroline had almost forgotten what it felt like to be desired, to feel a man's hands on her skin. She pushed the thoughts away, ashamed of herself. Isaac had made it clear he was not looking for a wife, and she had agreed she was not looking for a husband. It would be foolish to complicate a perfectly good working arrangement with romantic feelings. But feelings, Caroline was learning, did not care about logic or good sense. One afternoon in late July, Caroline was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard a horse approaching fast. She turned to see Isaac riding hard toward the barn, and even from a distance she could tell something was wrong. She dropped the sheet she had been hanging and hurried toward the barn, arriving just as Isaac dismounted. His face was pale beneath his tan, and he was favoring his right arm. "What happened?" Caroline asked, her heart pounding. "Stupid mistake," Isaac said through gritted teeth. "Horse spooked and threw me into a fence post. I think my shoulder is dislocated." Caroline could see the odd angle of his shoulder and felt her stomach turn. "We need to get you to the doctor." "No time. It needs to be put back in now or it will be worse." Isaac looked at her, his eyes dark with pain. "I need you to do it." "I do not know how." "I will tell you. I have seen it done before." Isaac leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard. "You just have to pull hard and fast while I brace myself. Please, Caroline, the longer we wait, the worse it will be." Caroline's hands were shaking, but she nodded. "Tell me exactly what to do." Isaac talked her through it, and Caroline tried to focus on his instructions rather than the fear churning in her gut. When she finally pulled hard on his arm, there was a sickening pop, and Isaac let out a strangled groan, but his shoulder looked normal again. "That was it," Isaac said, his voice weak. "Thank you. You need to rest. Come inside." Caroline helped him into the house and settled him in a chair at the kitchen table. She brought him water and a cloth soaked in cool water for his forehead, then examined his shoulder gently. It was already bruising, but the joint seemed stable. "You should have someone look at this properly," Caroline said. "It will be fine. You did good." Isaac looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that made Caroline's breath catch. "I am glad you were here." "So am I." Their faces were close, and for a moment Caroline thought Isaac might kiss her. She realized she wanted him to, wanted it with a sudden fierce intensity that shocked her. But then Isaac turned away, and the moment passed. "I should rest," he said. Yes, I will bring you some supper later. That night, Caroline lay awake for a long time, her thoughts churning. She could no longer pretend her feelings for Isaac were simply those of an employee for an employer. She was falling in love with him, had perhaps been falling for weeks now without realizing it. And the way Isaac had looked at her today suggested he might feel something too. But what could come of it? Isaac had been hurt before and was wary of marriage, and Caroline still carried the shame of her supposed barrenness, the reason the Sullivans had cast her out. What if she and Isaac grew close, only for him to realize she could never give him children? She could not bear to go through that heartbreak again. The next morning, Isaac's shoulder was stiff and painful, so Caroline insisted he take the day to rest. She handled the morning chores herself, feeding the horses and chickens, collecting eggs, hauling water. It was more physical work than she was used to, but she found she did not mind. There was something satisfying about caring for the animals, about being useful in a concrete way. When she came back inside, Isaac was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and looking frustrated. "I should be out there," he said. "You should be letting yourself heal. One day of rest will not ruin the ranch." Caroline began preparing breakfast, mixing batter for flapjacks. "Besides, I manage just fine." "I noticed. You're getting good at ranch work." "I am learning." Caroline poured batter onto the hot griddle. "I like it here, Isaac. I want you to know that. I am happy." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I am glad. I have been meaning to tell you the place has never looked better. You have made it feel like a real home." "That is kind of you to say." "It is the truth." Isaac paused. "Caroline, I want to ask you something, but I do not want to make things awkward between us." Caroline's heart began to race. "What is it?" "Do you ever think about staying here permanently, not just as a housekeeper, I mean, as something more?" Caroline set down the spatula and turned to face him, her pulse pounding in her ears. "What are you asking?" "I am asking if you might consider marrying me." Isaac stood up, wincing slightly at the movement. "I know I said I was not looking for a wife, and I meant it at the time, but these past weeks with you here, I have realized how lonely I was before. You have brought life back to this place, Caroline. You have brought life back to me." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. "Isaac, there is something you need to know. The reason Richard's parents cast me out is because I could not give them grandchildren. Richard and I tried for 3 years, and I never conceived. The doctor said there might be something wrong with me, that I might not be able to have children. I do not care about that. You should care. You are only 31 years old. You should have a wife who can give you children, who can continue your legacy here." Isaac crossed the room and took her hands in his. "I want you, Caroline. Not some imaginary woman who might give me children. You. If we have children someday, that would be wonderful. But if we do not, I will be just as happy. What I cannot do is go back to living in this house without you, eating meals alone, having no one to talk to at the end of the day. You have become essential to me." "I am scared," Caroline whispered. "I am scared of failing you the way I failed Richard's parents. I am scared of losing you the way I lost Richard." "Life does not come with guarantees. We could both die tomorrow in 100 different ways. But I would rather have whatever time I can with you than spend my life alone out of fear." Isaac lifted one hand to cup her cheek. "I am falling in love with you, Carolyn Sullivan. I think I have been since the day I found you at the water trough in town, looking lost and brave at the same time." "I love you too," Caroline said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I have been trying not to, but I cannot help it. You are kind and good, and you make me feel safe in a way I have not felt since Richard died, but I am terrified of disappointing you." "You could never disappoint me." Isaac leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and Caroline felt something inside her break open, all the fear and grief and loneliness of the past year pouring out as she kissed him back. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac smiled at her. Is that a yes? Yes, Carolyn said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Desdemona. Caroline wore a new dress she had sewn herself, pale yellow cotton that brought out the gold in her brown hair, and Isaac wore his Sunday best, his hair freshly cut and his face clean shaven. The only guests were the pastor and his wife, and the ceremony lasted less than 15 minutes, but Caroline had never felt happier. As Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Caroline found herself thinking of Richard, hoping he would approve of her choice to love again. She would always carry him in her heart, but she was ready to move forward, to build a new life with this good man who wanted her despite her flaws. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Isaac made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. He touched her as though she were precious, kissing every inch of her skin, whispering how beautiful she was. Caroline had forgotten what it felt like to be worshipped this way, to feel truly desired, and she gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Caroline felt a peace settle over her that she had not experienced in years. This was where she belonged, not in the Sullivan house where she had been tolerated at best, but here with Isaac, in a home they were building together. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Isaac said, pulling her closer. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for finding me when I needed you most. The months that followed were the happiest of Caroline's life. She and Isaac fell into an easy partnership, working side by side during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. Isaac taught her to ride horseback, and Caroline proved to be a natural, soon helping him move cattle from one pasture to another. She learned to rope and brand, to doctor sick animals, to read the sky for signs of changing weather. In return, Caroline made sure the house was always warm and welcoming, with good food on the table and clean clothes in the wardrobe. She planted flower beds around the porch, bright splashes of color in the brown landscape. She baked pies for church socials and befriended the other ranch wives, slowly building a community in Desdemona. But there was still a shadow hanging over her happiness, and it came every month like clockwork. Each time her monthly courses arrived, Caroline felt a stab of disappointment and fear. She had told Isaac she might not be able to have children, and he had said it did not matter, but what if he changed his mind? What if, like the Sullivans, he eventually came to resent her for her barrenness? She tried to hide her disappointment, but Isaac knew her too well. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after supper, he took her hand and said, "Talk to me, Caroline. What is troubling you?" "Nothing. I am fine." "You're not fine. You have been sad for days now." Isaac pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "Please talk to me." Caroline rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and horse and the outdoors. "I am not with child again. I know you said it does not matter, but I cannot help feeling like I am failing you." "Caroline, look at me." Isaac waited until she met his eyes. "You are not failing me. You could never fail me. Yes, I would love to have children someday, but I married you because I love you, not because I wanted a broodmare. If we never have children, my life will still be full and happy because I have you. Do you understand that?" "I am trying to." "Try harder." Isaac kissed her forehead. "I mean it, Caroline. You are enough. Just you, exactly as you are." Caroline felt tears slide down her cheeks. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" I ask myself the same question every day. Winter came to Desdemona, not with snow, but with cold winds and endless gray skies. Caroline threw herself into preparing for the holidays, baking cookies and cakes, sewing new curtains for the parlor, stringing pine boughs around the mantel. Isaac brought home a small cedar tree, and they decorated it with paper chains and popcorn strings, laughing like children as they worked. On Christmas morning, Isaac gave Caroline a beautiful shawl he had ordered from San Antonio, soft blue wool with an intricate pattern. Caroline gave him a new saddle she had saved for months to buy, and the look of joy on his face was worth every penny. They spent the day quietly, just the two of them, eating too much and playing cards by the fire. It was simple and perfect, and Caroline felt truly blessed. As the new year began, Caroline threw herself into the work of the ranch with renewed energy. She helped Isaac deliver a calf during a difficult birth, staying up all night to make sure both mother and baby survived. She learned to shoot a rifle well enough to scare off coyotes that came sniffing around the chicken coop. She rode fence lines with Isaac, repairing breaks and checking for stray cattle. They were partners in every sense of the word, and Caroline loved the life they were building together. But she still could not shake the lingering sadness that came with each passing month, the reminder that her body seemed unable to do what women's bodies were supposed to do. In late February, Caroline woke one morning feeling strange, a queasy sensation in her stomach that had nothing to do with anything she had eaten. She made it to the chamber pot just in time to lose her supper from the night before, and Isaac came running at the sound. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her and pulling her hair back from her face. "I think so. Maybe I ate something bad." But the next morning brought the same nausea, and the morning after that. By the fourth day, Caroline allowed herself to hope, though she was terrified to say the words aloud. Isaac figured it out before she found the courage to tell him. He came in from morning chores to find her sitting at the kitchen table, nibbling on dry toast and looking green. "Caroline," he said softly, "are you with child?" Caroline looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I think I might be. I am afraid to believe it." Isaac let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and begging him to stop before she was sick again. "I cannot believe it," Isaac said, setting her down gently and placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Maybe. It is still early. I do not want to get our hopes up." "Too late. My hopes are already sky high." Isaac kissed her deeply. "You are going to be a mother, Carolyn. You are going to be the best mother any child could ask for." Caroline allowed herself to believe it then, and the joy that flooded through her was unlike anything she had ever felt. She was going to have a baby, Isaac's baby. After years of disappointment and shame, her body was finally doing what she had begun to believe was impossible. The pregnancy was not easy. Caroline was sick most mornings for the first 3 months, and even after that passed, she struggled with exhaustion and aching feet. But Isaac was endlessly patient, taking over more of the household chores and insisting she rest whenever she could. He brought her tea in the mornings and rubbed her feet at night, and he talked to her growing belly, telling their baby about the ranch and the horses and how much he was looking forward to meeting them. As summer approached and Caroline's belly swelled, they began preparing the small guest room as a nursery. Caroline sewed tiny gowns and knitted blankets, her heart nearly bursting with love for this child she had not yet met. Isaac built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and painted it white. On a sweltering afternoon in early August, Caroline's pains began. Isaac rode to town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor and the midwife, and then he stayed by Caroline's side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. "I cannot do this," Caroline gasped at one point, exhausted and frightened. "Yes, you can," Isaac said firmly. "You are the strongest woman I know. You can do anything." And she did. Just after midnight, with a final tremendous effort, Caroline brought their son into the world. He was red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way, and when the midwife placed him in Caroline's arms, she could not stop the tears that flowed down her face. "He is beautiful," she whispered. Isaac was crying too, unashamed of the tears streaming down his face as he looked at his wife and son. "He is perfect. You did so well, Caroline. I am so proud of you." They named him Michael Richard Thompson, honoring Caroline's first husband while giving their son his own identity. Michael had Isaac's dark hair and Caroline's brown eyes, and from the moment he was born, he had both of them wrapped around his tiny fingers. The first few months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Caroline had never known she could love someone so fiercely, this tiny person who depended on her for everything. She nursed him and rocked him and sang him lullabies her mother had sung to her. Isaac was a devoted father, walking the floor with Michael when he fussed at night, making silly faces to coax out smiles, talking to him constantly as though he could understand every word. "He is going to think you are strange," Caroline teased one evening, finding Isaac showing their 3-month-old son the different tools in the barn. "He needs to learn about ranch work," Isaac said seriously, though his eyes were twinkling. "It is never too early to start." Caroline laughed and kissed them both, her heart so full she thought it might burst. As Michael grew from infant to toddler, the Thompson ranch prospered. Isaac's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to expand the herd and improve the outbuildings. Caroline kept the books and managed the household budget, proving to have a good head for figures. They hired a young man named James to help with the heavy work, giving Isaac more time to spend with his family. When Michael was 2 years old, Caroline discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only joy and excitement. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1885, a delicate little thing with blonde hair and Isaac's gray eyes. They named her Sarah after Caroline's mother. With 2 children, life on the ranch was even busier, but Caroline had never been happier. She watched Isaac teach Michael to ride on a gentle old mare, saw him rock Sarah to sleep with a tenderness that made her heart ache. This was the family she had dreamed of during those dark years in the Sullivan house, the life she had thought would never be hers. One afternoon in late summer, as Caroline sat on the porch watching Isaac play with the children in the yard, a wagon approached. Caroline's heart sank as she recognized the driver. It was George Sullivan, her former father-in-law. Caroline stood and walked to the edge of the porch, her body tense. Isaac noticed immediately and came to stand beside her, Michael in his arms and Sarah holding his hand. George climbed down from the wagon slowly, looking older than Caroline remembered. He removed his hat and nodded to them. "Caroline," he said, "I hope I'm not intruding." "What do you want?" Isaac asked, his voice cold. "I came to apologize." George's eyes moved to the children, and something painful flickered in his expression. "Margaret passed 2 months ago, pneumonia. Before she died, she asked me to find you, to tell you she was sorry for how we treated you." Caroline felt a complex tangle of emotions. She had not thought about the Sullivans in years, had been too busy building her new life to dwell on the past. But hearing that Margaret was dead brought back the pain of those final days, the casual cruelty of being cast out. "I do not know what to say," Caroline said quietly. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that Margaret regretted what she did, and I regret it too. We were wrong, Caroline. You were a good wife to Richard, and we should have treated you like family after he passed. Instead, we let our disappointment and grief turn us cruel." George looked at Michael, who was watching him with curious eyes. "You have a beautiful family. Richard would have been happy for you." "Thank you," Caroline said, surprised to find she meant it. "I hope you're doing well, George." "Well enough. I am selling the ranch, moving to live with my sister in Dallas. Too many ghosts here." He put his hat back on. "I'm glad you found happiness, Caroline. You deserved it." After George left, Caroline stood on the porch for a long time, Isaac's arm around her shoulders. She thought about the bitter woman she might have become if Isaac had not found her that day in Desdemona, if he had not given her a chance at a new life. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked. "I am more than all right," Caroline said, turning to look at her husband and children, her home, her life. "I am blessed." The years rolled on, bringing both challenges and joys. Michael grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did, following Isaac everywhere and learning all he could about cattle and horses. Sarah was bright and curious, constantly asking questions and bringing home injured animals for Caroline to nurse back to health. In 1887, Caroline gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Elizabeth. The house was chaotic and loud, full of laughter and occasional tears, and Caroline loved every exhausting minute of it. Isaac proved to be not just a good father, but an extraordinary one. He was patient and kind, firm when necessary, but never harsh. He taught his sons to work hard and treat people fairly, and he made sure his daughters knew they were just as capable and valuable as their brothers. On Sunday afternoons, he would load the whole family into the wagon and take them on adventures, exploring the countryside, fishing in the creek, or visiting neighbors. Caroline sometimes thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived at the Thompson Ranch, broken and scared and convinced her life was over. That woman would not recognize the confident, happy person she had become. She had found not just a home, but a purpose, not just a husband, but a true partner. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Caroline with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children with a trusted neighbor and spent 3 days in the city, staying in a fancy hotel and eating at restaurants and attending a theater performance. It was extravagant and wonderful, and Caroline felt like a girl again, giddy with love for this man who still found ways to surprise her after all these years. On their last evening, as they walked along the river in the warm twilight, Isaac took her hand and said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is it?" "I want to make sure you know how much you mean to me. Not just as my wife or the mother of my children, but as my partner and my best friend. These 10 years with you have been the best of my life, Caroline. I cannot imagine my world without you in it." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel the same way. You saved me, Isaac. You gave me a life I thought I would never have." "You saved me too. I was just going through the motions before you came along, working myself half to death with nothing to show for it but an empty house and a lonely existence. You filled my life with joy and meaning. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving." Isaac pulled her close and kissed her deeply. "I love you more now than the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you." "And I promise the same," Caroline whispered against his lips, "for the rest of our lives." They returned to the ranch renewed, diving back into the busy rhythm of family life. Michael, now 10 years old, was talking about going to school in town for a few years to get a proper education before returning to help run the ranch. Sarah wanted to be a teacher, and Caroline was encouraging her to pursue that dream. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping everyone on their toes. One evening in the fall of 1892, as Caroline sat on the porch shelling peas and watching the children play in the yard, she reflected on how far she had come. 15 years ago, she had stood on the road outside the Sullivan Ranch with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Now she had a home, a husband who adored her, 4 healthy children, and a community that respected her. The pain of those days had faded to a distant memory, and Caroline rarely thought about Margaret and George Sullivan anymore. She had forgiven them, she realized, not because they deserved it, but because holding on to anger and hurt would have poisoned the beautiful life she had built. Isaac came out onto the porch and settled into the chair beside her, tired from a long day's work, but smiling as he watched their children. "Can you believe this is our life?" Caroline asked. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure it is real." Isaac reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Thank you for saying yes that day when I asked you to marry me. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with a rundown ranch and no prospects except hard work and hope. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a desperate widow with nothing to offer but a willingness to work hard." Caroline squeezed his hand. "We built something beautiful together, Isaac, something lasting." "We did, and we are not done yet. We have grandchildren to spoil, an old age to grumble through together, and 1,000 more sunsets to watch from this porch." Caroline laughed. "That sounds like a fine plan to me." As the years continued to pass, the Thompson Ranch became a landmark in the area, known for quality cattle and horses, and even more for the family that ran it with honesty and integrity. Michael took over more of the ranch operations as Isaac began to slow down, proving to be just as good a rancher as his father. Sarah went away to school and came back as a teacher, marrying a nice young man who worked at the bank in Desdemona and settling down just a few miles from the ranch. The twins surprised everyone by both developing a talent for training horses, and soon people were coming from miles around to buy Thompson-trained mounts. The ranch expanded and prospered, but it never lost the warmth and welcome that Carolyn had instilled from the very beginning. In the summer of 1897, as Caroline and Isaac celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary, they threw a big party at the ranch. The whole community came, bringing food and music and laughter. As Caroline looked around at her children, now young adults, and the friends and neighbors who had become like family, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home and the children were cleaning up, Caroline and Isaac took a walk out to the old oak tree at the edge of the property. It had been a scorching day, but the evening was pleasant, with a cool breeze blowing in from the north. "Do you remember the first time we came out here?" Isaac asked, pulling Caroline close. "Of course. You brought me here a week after I started working for you. You said this was your favorite spot on the whole ranch." "It still is, especially when you're here with me." Isaac kissed her temple. 21 years, Caroline. We have built such a good life together." "The best life," Caroline agreed. "Sometimes I think about that girl standing by the water trough in Desdemona, scared and alone and certain her life was over. If I could go back and tell her what was waiting for her just around the corner, she would never believe me. I think about the man I was too before you. I was so focused on the ranch, on proving I could make it on my own, that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly live. You taught me that a house is not a home without love in it, that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with." They stood together under the darkening sky, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, the horses nickered softly in the barn. "I love you," Caroline said simply. "I will love you for the rest of my days and beyond." "And I love you," Isaac replied. "You are my heart, Caroline Thompson. You always will be." The years that followed brought both joy and sorrow, as all years do. Caroline's friend from church passed away, and Isaac struggled with a painful injury from a fall off his horse. But through it all, they had each other, their love, as strong as ever. Michael married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch and gave them their first grandchild, a baby boy they named Isaac. Caroline held her grandson for the first time and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. She had worried, all those years ago, that she would never be a mother, never hold a child of her own. Now she was a grandmother, watching the legacy she and Isaac had built continue into the next generation. Sarah had 3 children, all girls, who spent their summers at the ranch learning to ride and helping with chores. The twins both married within a year of each other, Thomas to a girl from town, and Elizabeth to a cowboy who came to buy horses and stayed for love. The ranch echoed with the sounds of grandchildren, their laughter and questions and boundless energy keeping Caroline and Isaac young. On a crisp morning in October of 1902, Caroline woke to find Isaac already up and sitting on the edge of the bed watching her with a soft expression. "What is it?" she asked, reaching for his hand. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am. 26 years of marriage, and you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Still the person I most want to talk to at the end of every day, still the one who makes me feel like anything is possible." Caroline sat up and wrapped her arms around him. They were both older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but Isaac's embrace felt exactly the same as it had the day they married, strong and sure and infinitely comforting. "I am the lucky one," Caroline said. "You gave me everything I thought I had lost, everything I thought I would never have. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart." "We gave those things to each other," Isaac corrected gently. "That is what a true partnership is, Caroline. 2 people building something together that neither could have created alone." They sat together in the morning light, holding each other close, grateful for every day they had been given. Outside, the ranch was coming to life. their son directing the ranch hands, their grandchildren gathering eggs and feeding chickens, carrying on the traditions Caroline and Isaac had established so many years ago. Later that day, as Caroline worked in her kitchen preparing supper for the family, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been cast out by people who should have loved her, had been told she was worthless because she could not bear children. But she had survived, had found love again in the most unexpected place, and had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. She had given Isaac 4 children and helped him build the Thompson Ranch into something they could both be proud of. She had created a home filled with love and laughter, had raised children who were kind and hard-working and decent. She had proven to herself, if to no one else, that her worth was not defined by her ability to bear children, but by the content of her character and the love in her heart. As the sun began to set and the family gathered around the long table Isaac had built when Michael was a baby, Caroline looked at each beloved face and felt a peace settle over her. This was her legacy, not just the children and grandchildren, but the love that bound them all together, the values of hard work and integrity and compassion that would be passed down through generations. Isaac caught her eye from across the table and smiled, and Caroline smiled back, a lifetime of love and understanding passing between them in that single glance. They had been through so much together, had faced challenges and overcome them, had built something beautiful and lasting out of nothing but hope and determination. After supper, as was their custom, Caroline and Isaac walked out onto the porch to watch the stars emerge in the darkening sky. They settled into the chairs they had sat in for over 2 decades, their hands clasped together, comfortable in the silence that comes from years of companionship. "Do you remember when I asked you to marry me?" Isaac asked suddenly. "Of course. You were so nervous and I was terrified. I was afraid you would say no, that you would tell me you were not ready or that you did not feel the same way I did." Isaac laughed softly, "But you said yes, and my whole world changed in that moment." "Mine too. I had been so lost, Isaac. I thought my life was over, that I would spend the rest of my days alone and unwanted. But you saw me, really saw me, and you offered me not just a job, but a future." "I fell in love with you that first day," Isaac admitted. "I knew it was too soon, that you were grieving and vulnerable, so I tried to keep my distance, but every day that passed, I loved you more. By the time I finally worked up the courage to propose, I was half crazy with wanting you." Caroline turned to look at her husband, seeing past the gray hair and weathered skin to the handsome cowboy who had rescued her so many years ago. "I love you just as much now as I did on our wedding day. More, maybe, because now I know all your annoying habits and I love you anyway." Isaac laughed, the sound warm and rich in the evening air. "I love you too, even though you snore and hog the blankets and get grumpy when you're hungry." They sat together as the night deepened, talking and laughing, remembering all the moments that had brought them to this place, the hard times and the good times, the struggles and the triumphs, all woven together into the tapestry of their shared life. As the years continued to unfold, Caroline and Isaac grew older, but their love never diminished. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren, a party that lasted long into the night with music and dancing and storytelling. Caroline wore a new dress Isaac had bought her, deep blue silk that made her eyes sparkle, and Isaac told anyone who would listen that his wife was the most beautiful woman in Texas. They took walks every evening, moving slower now, but still hand in hand, still finding joy in each other's company. They rocked grandchildren to sleep and taught them songs and told them stories about the old days. They watched their ranch continue to prosper under Michael's careful management, secure in the knowledge that their legacy would continue long after they were gone. On a warm spring evening in 1906, as Caroline and Isaac celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with their family gathered around them, Caroline stood to make a toast. At 52 years old, she was still a handsome woman, her hair silver now, but her eyes as bright as ever. 30 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "I thought my life was over. I had lost my husband, been cast out by his family, and I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I stood in the middle of Desdemona with everything I owned in a single suitcase, terrified and alone. And then this man right here, this wonderful, kind, stubborn man, offered me a job on his ranch. He did not know me, had no reason to trust me or help me, but he did anyway, and in doing so, he gave me back my life." Caroline looked at Isaac, her eyes shining with tears. "You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never love again. You gave me children when I had been told I was barren. You gave me a family and a purpose and a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. You are my heart, Isaac Thompson, and I thank God every day that he led me to you." Isaac stood and pulled Caroline into his arms, kissing her as their children and grandchildren applauded and cheered. When he finally released her, there were tears running down his face. "You saved me too," he said quietly just for her. "Never forget that. You saved me too." The party continued late into the night, but eventually everyone went home or to bed, leaving Caroline and Isaac alone on the porch, watching the stars and holding hands just as they had done thousands of times before. 30 years, Caroline mused. "It feels like forever and no time at all." "I could spend 30 more years with you and it still would not be enough," Isaac said. "I want to grow old with you, Caroline. I want to watch our grandchildren have children of their own. I want to sit on this porch with you when we're both ancient and gray, still holding hands and watching the sunset." "That sounds perfect to me." As the years rolled on into the new century, Caroline and Isaac did exactly that. They grew older together, their bodies slowing, but their love as strong as ever. They celebrated the birth of great-grandchildren and mourned the loss of old friends. They watched the world change around them, automobiles replacing horses, electricity coming to even small towns like Desdemona. But some things never changed. The Thompson Ranch remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved in an increasingly modern world. Caroline's kitchen was still the heart of the home, always filled with the smells of fresh bread and simmering stew. Isaac still walked the property every day, checking on the cattle and horses, making sure everything was in order. On a cool evening in autumn of 1912, Caroline and Isaac celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. Their children had offered to throw a party, but they had declined, preferring to spend the evening alone together. They sat on the porch as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red, painting the sky with color. Caroline rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, feeling utterly content. "I have been thinking," Isaac said, his voice thoughtful. "About what?" "About how different my life would have been if I had not gone into town that day, if I had not seen you standing by that water trough looking lost and brave and beautiful. What if I had stayed home? What if I'd been too shy to talk to you? We could have missed each other completely, lived our whole lives never knowing what we could have had." "But we did not miss each other," Caroline pointed out. "We found each other exactly when we were meant to. I believe that with all my heart, Isaac. God led you to me that day, and He led me to you. It was meant to be. I believe that too, and I am grateful for it every single day." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "You are my greatest blessing, Caroline Thompson. You and our children and this life we have built together. I could not have asked for anything more." "Neither could I," Caroline agreed, her heart full to overflowing. "Neither could I." They sat together as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for every moment they had been given. Inside the house, their legacy lived on through photos on the walls and furniture they had chosen together and memories in every room. Outside, the ranch stretched out under the stars, a testament to their hard work and determination. As the evening deepened and the temperature dropped, they finally went inside, climbing the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for 36 years. They undressed and climbed into bed, fitting together as easily as they always had, two pieces of the same whole. "I love you," Caroline whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Isaac replied. forever and always. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the way they had fallen asleep thousands of times before, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together just as they had faced everything for more than 3 decades. The story of Carolyn and Isaac Thompson became a legend in Desdemona, Texas, the tale of a widow cast out by her in-laws and rescued by a kind cowboy who fell in love with her. It was a story their grandchildren told to their children, and those children told to their own, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that kindness mattered, and that a person's worth was not determined by others' expectations, but by the content of their character. Caroline lived to be 83 years old, passing peacefully in her sleep in the early spring of 1927 with Isaac holding her hand. Isaac followed her just 6 months later, unable to live without the woman who had been his partner and best friend for 45 years. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery outside Desdemona, their graves marked with simple stones that read beloved husband, father, grandfather, and beloved wife, mother, grandmother. But their true legacy was not in stone, or even in the land they had tended so carefully. It was in the family they had raised, the values they had instilled, and the love they had shared so freely. The Thompson Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down from parent to child, a living monument to 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful together. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, people said you could almost see them. 2 figures standing hand in hand on the porch of the old ranch house, watching the sunset together just as they had done for so many years, their love transcending even death, enduring forever in the land they had loved and the family they had created. The end of their story was really just a beginning, the start of a legacy that would continue for generations, proof that love could conquer even the deepest hurt, that kindness could change lives, and that sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected places. Caroline Sullivan had stood alone and afraid on the road outside Desdemona in the summer of 1882, believing her life was over. Instead, it was just beginning, and the love she found with Isaac Thompson became the foundation for a family dynasty that would endure long after they were both gone, a testament to the power of compassion, second chances, and love that never gives up.